Cut out gluten, eliminate sugar, stop eating those toxic seed oils. You hear it all the time from fitness influencers who are obsessing over specific foods that they call inflammatory. But while we are scrutinizing these ingredient labels, the actual drivers of chronic inflammation are hiding elsewhere. They are not exotic foods or mysterious toxins. They're lifestyle factors that most people are ignoring. So today we're going to break down what is inflammation, why your anti-inflammatory diet might not solve the problem, what are the lifestyle factors that are more important than food choices when it comes to inflammation, and how to engineer your approach to address the root causes instead of chasing symptoms. Welcome to Wits and Weights, the show that helps you build a strong, healthy physique using evidence, engineering, and efficiency. I'm your host, certified nutrition coach, Philip Pape, and today we're engineering our way through one of the most misunderstood topics in health and fitness, and that is inflammation, the dreaded I word, the misused I word. The fitness industry has turned inflammation into a boogeyman, convincing people they have to eliminate foods. They have to buy expensive supplements, follow restrictive protocols. But when we apply a little bit of systems thinking to inflammation and look at the science, we discover that the conventional approach is solving the wrong problem entirely. It's not going to get you anywhere when it comes to inflammation. Now, before we get into it, if this episode opens your eyes to how inflammation really works, I just want you to do me a favor and text it to someone who's been struggling with some of these topics and the confusion and the misinformation in the industry, who's curious about inflammation, inflammatory issues, or anti-inflammatory foods. Just text this show to a friend. That's all I'm going to ask for today. And with that, let's get into it and start by defining the system. Talk about what inflammation actually is. We can't solve a problem until we understand what it is and what you're dealing with, and inflammation is highly misunderstood. There's really two processes going on here. There's acute inflammation, and that's your body's immediate response system. Think of it as like your biological emergency response. You cut your finger, you twist your ankle, you get an infection, and boom, you get pain, heat, redness, swelling, right? This is a very well understood aspect of acute inflammation. You could even get acute inflammation from positive practices like strength training, where you have an immediate response to the stimulus you place on your muscles, and the inflammation process causes them to adapt. This is all normal. This is essential. This is a good thing. But then we have chronic low-grade inflammation, which is the one that we are actually concerned about. And this is like having your emergency system stuck in the on position, right? The fight or flight, the high alert system is just stuck on for months or even years. It is a silent killer. It is systemic. It is linked to cardiovascular disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's, metabolic dysfunction, you name it. And so here's where our engineering mindset comes in that these are two completely different systems with different inputs, different processes, different solutions. And most people are trying to solve chronic inflammation using an acute inflammation style logic. And that's where we fail in the process, especially when it comes to foods, fear-mongering over specific foods, which is why I'm making this episode. So let's go back and step back a bit and look at the root cause. When most people think about inflammation, they immediately jump to foods, especially when you hear about things like seed oils. They're inflammatory. But the data actually doesn't support this. It tells us a very different story. And that is that the number one driver of chronic inflammation is visceral fat. Your belly fat is, it's not just sitting there looking sad. It is an endocrine organ. It pumps out inflammatory cytokines. And we're going to explain these a lot. This is part of the blood markers of inflammation you can have. Interleukin 6, TNF alpha, and C-reactive protein. You've probably heard of the last one. It gets discussed a lot. CRP, C-reactive protein. These are inflammatory markers that can be measured in the bloodstream. And visceral fat is actually the number one driver of those byproducts, those inflammatory cytokines. So that's the first one. The second one is physical inactivity. Sedentary behavior. It doesn't just make you weak and lazy and unfit and causes you to eat more and do all the other things we don't want to do. It also creates a pro-inflammatory state because when you're not moving, your immune system gets, we'll say, confused. It starts attacking your own tissues. You're not living like a human should live. You're essentially wasting your life being sedentary. Meanwhile, exercise, training, movement produces myokines that actively reduce inflammation. So that movement and training is anti-inflammatory. The third driver is chronic stress and poor sleep. When you're chronically stressed, when you're sleep deprived, right? And sometimes they go hand in hand. We know this affects our cortisol. Your immune system tends to overreact, and then inflammation becomes your default state. You're in a more inflammatory situation. The fourth driver is environmental toxins. So as much as I don't really talk about these too often, I've had some guests on that talk about them. Smoking is the big one. We don't think of that as environmental toxin, but it really is. And I'm glad I don't have to walk around in clouds of secondhand smoke like I did in the 80s when they had, smoking sections in the restaurant, smoking sections even on an airplane at one point. But also things like air pollution, the chemicals, the things that we're exposed to in a lot of our products, some we're discovering, some we're maybe not aware of, and any other exposure that triggers inflammatory cascades. These are real, but especially something like smoking and air pollution. Now, notice what's missing from that list: specific foods. Specific foods are missing. And this is where we have to separate the signal from the noise, because yes, diet affects inflammation, but not the way you think. It's the dietary patterns, not the individual foods, that drive inflammation. A Western dietary pattern, which is high in ultra-processed foods, high in sugar, high in refined carbs, high in trans fats, is going to create inflammation through multiple pathways. It's not specific foods, it's the whole pattern. It disrupts your gut microbiome. You have large swings in blood sugar. You've got more oxidative stress. You've got all the conditions that contribute to obesity, mainly through overconsumption, right? It has nothing to do with seed oils, okay? It's overconsumption. It's the gut health, right? It's, the misuse of insulin through blood sugar spikes because you're not active, you're not lifting weights. It all compounds together. Because in fact, somebody who has a much improved lifestyle can, I'll say, get away with a somewhat poor dietary pattern versus someone who doesn't, for that very reason. Because it's not the individual foods, it's a dietary pattern as well as the lifestyle. So if you remove individual foods, it's not going to impact systemic inflammation unless you have a specific intolerance to those foods, right? The whole nightshades, oxalates, gluten-free for everyone approach, there's no evidence that those reduce inflammation in healthy people. Same thing with seed oils. In fact, we know adding in seed oils or replacing saturated fats with seed oils improves health outcomes. It is definitively demonstrated in the research. There's no argument about that. And regardless of the processing, people talk about, shelf rancidity. And no, none of that is actually borne out by the evidence as being a concern based on the outcomes. In fact, there's a study that found a pro-inflammatory lifestyle predicted poor fitness, but diet alone didn't significantly affect the outcomes, right? The lifestyle factors are doing the heavy lifting. And so inflammation isn't caused by eating a specific food. It's caused by the cumulative effect of multiple lifestyle factors that create a pro-inflammatory environment in your body. So if we know this, the good thing is it gives us a little more freedom and flexibility than we might have thought. A more flexible diet, for example, but we could also engineer an anti-inflammatory lifestyle for ourselves. We can optimize the system rather than these individual components that don't actually have an impact. So first, we should address the biggest lever, which is body composition. When I mentioned visceral fat is the largest driver of chronic inflammation, we want to lose our visceral fat, and that removes the primary inflammatory factor in your body. It doesn't mean you have to get shredded. That's not what it means. Even just modest fat loss will significantly reduce inflammatory markers. And this is why, fat loss, weight loss, whatever you want to call it, simply having a lower body weight in and of itself actually solves a lot of the health markers and health issues that people have. Not everything. And it's not about scale weight. It's more about body composition, right? More about losing fat, holding on and building muscle and losing fat. So that's the biggest lever right there, which is everything we talk about on this show for the most part. The second thing is implementing regular movement, not just training, but also moving throughout the day, walking, but also not sitting for long stretches to keep your muscles producing the anti-inflammatory myokines. I forgot how to pronounce these. And strength training is very powerful here because muscle tissue actively fights inflammation. So just having muscle is highly anti-inflammatory. The third thing is you're going to have to improve your sleep and stress. That's just always the thing we need to be doing. And if you are running on low sleep, running on high stress, high perceived stress, psychological, physical, whatever, that is creating a highly inflammatory state for you. It is a legitimate physiological outcome of having too much stress and not enough sleep and not enough recovery. Recovery is not optional. The older we get, the more important recovery gets by leaps and bounds. It is a foundation. The fourth tip I have here out of 5 is optimizing your dietary pattern. So here's where people will hear me and say, how can you tell people to eat seed oils? How can you tell people to eat like so many carbs and fat? And they say, no, I'm not telling people, how much or what to eat. I'm asking you to optimize your diet for you based on a variety of factors, based on your satiety, eating guilt-free, supporting your performance goals, supporting your energy needs. And so what that looks like for people to be able to do it sustainably is prioritizing whole foods, fiber, diversity of your diet, which means proteins, fats, and carbs, and nutrients, of course, that are going to support your gut microbiome. So we're not talking about food perfectionism. We're not talking about specific foods to add in or avoid. We're talking about the overall dietary pattern through a variety of foods that you choose that meet these needs. And that's the flexibility part that makes a huge difference. And then fifth and finally, we want to minimize environmental toxins when you can control them. And that's easy when it comes to smoking. Not easy. I mean, obviously it's hard to quit smoking for those who are addicted, but it's an obvious lever. Limiting or eliminating alcohol, and then all the other chemical exposures to whatever degree makes sense for you in your life, depending on where you live, depending on what products you use, whether you microwave foods and plastic, I'm not going to get into those details. That's not my area of expertise, to be honest. That's very personalized, and I don't want to fear-monger over that, but the accumulation of these does create a level of inflammatory load that your other healthy habits are basically counteracting. And if you want to just further improve that inflammatory state, you have to consider those. All right. So to summarize, it's body composition, movement, sleep and stress, AKA recovery, your dietary pattern, and minimizing environmental toxins. Now, I alluded to this briefly, but I want to hit it home. Okay. Your muscle tissue isn't just for strength. It isn't just for aesthetics or function. It's your primary anti-inflammatory organ. When you contract your muscles during exercise, they release compounds in the moment called myokines that communicate with your fat tissue, your liver, your brain, your immune system. And they actively suppress inflammatory pathways, and they promote healing throughout your body, right? And the funny thing is, lifting weights is a hormetic stressor. It's an acute stressor. It's an acute level of inflammation, but it benefits your chronic inflammation tremendously. Every time you lift weights, every time you move with intention, you are programming your body to be less inflammatory, right? It's just like you're adding more calorie burning tissue to your body, and that just operates 24/7. Same thing here. You're creating a less inflammatory environment. And that's why people who strength train consistently have lower inflammatory markers in their blood than sedentary people, even when controlling for body weight. So we have to have the body composition, but we also have to be training and building muscle. The muscle itself is actively fighting inflammation at the cellular level. And it gets stronger the more you use it and the more you train, the more anti-inflammatory your body becomes. So there's nothing more apropos than, this show, Wits and Weights, using your brain to understand that inflammation comes from lifestyle, and then lifting some weights, knowing that muscle and strength and all of that is the biggest anti-inflammatory impact here. And I've talked to otherwise healthy people who don't strength train, and they're leaving a lot on the table because they're making it a lot harder than themselves in multiple ways, especially as they get older. So the fitness industry, they want you to believe inflammation is complicated, that you have to have special diets, you have to buy their supplement to control it, you have to cut out these foods. You look at the reels of these idiots in the grocery store pointing out why you shouldn't eat this and shouldn't eat that. Ignore it. Unfollow, right? The truth is that inflammation is a systems problem with systems solutions. Stop obsessing over individual foods and start optimizing the lifestyle factors. It's not easy. It takes effort. It does. It takes patience. But you have all the information at your fingertips on how to make it happen. And now it's just a matter of the right level of commitment and action. And sometimes that's support and motivation as well, through whether it's coaching or community or just listening to the show. Reach out, join our Facebook group if you need some more help, if you need a community. I've got coaching options as well if you need that. I want you to build muscle to create your body's anti-inflammatory pharmacy. That's your pharmacy. No supplements. I want you to move regularly to keep your immune system balanced. I want you to manage your stress and sleep to prevent cortisol-driven inflammation. I want you to focus on the dietary pattern and the flexibility, not food perfectionism and restriction. Because your body's very sophisticated. We've hit on this point many times. It is designed to maintain balance, to maintain homeostasis when you give it the right inputs. And so work with that. All right. This episode's kind of short, but I think it hit on the main points that inflammation is a systems-based lifestyle choice. That's how I'm going to put it. It's not specific foods. It's really about lifestyle. So the same lifestyle that improves your physique, your body composition, your health will also give you less inflammation. If this episode changed how you think about inflammation, I want you to text it to someone who's been caught up in the hype, in the anti-inflammatory hype. Maybe they don't yet understand that the solution isn't to restrict more, to do carnivore, something like that. It's just a better system and a better lifestyle. And information like this can literally change someone's relationship with food and their health, and then it can change their life. So I really encourage you to text it with a friend, let them know about the episode. As a bonus, post it to social media, to your story or to your feed, and tag me. I'm at Wits and Weights on all platforms. And that's it. Inflammation. The more you know, right? Until next time, keep using your wits, lifting those weights, and remember, when it comes to inflammation, engineer your lifestyle system. Don't chase the symptoms or specific foods. I'll talk to you next time here on the Wits and Weights podcast.